If you're planning to go abroad after BDS, there are a lot of questions in your mind, like what are the best countries right now? What are the common mistakes people do when they're planning to go abroad? And to answer all those questions, we have with us today the co-founders of Dental Window. Dental Window is a career consulting company in India dedicated to dentists and run by dentists. Dental Window has empowered hundreds of dentists to pursue rewarding careers across the globe through personalized guidance and strategic expertise. For the details about the expertise of Dr. Kosha Timbadia and Yusuf Dadarkar in the comment section and the description below. I'm Dr. Satish Kumar. This is Kaizen Dental. Our aim here is to help dentists succeed. Hi, Dr. Kusha and Yusuf. Thank you for joining. This is a topic which everyone is keen to know about. How do they go abroad after BDS and how do they select the right country? So let's cut the chase and get into the meat of it. How do you think one should decide which country to go abroad after BDS?
Right, fantastic. That's a great first question. Thank you so much, Dr. Satish, firstly, for inviting us. And I, on the behalf of the full dental fraternity, firstly, would like to thank you for your amazing work that you are so selflessly doing. So, thanks a lot for that. Now, to the meaty part of the question, which is which country should, which are the popular countries that people should consider? Well, of course, the leaderboard is very clear. The undisputed leader is always going to be the United States, followed by Canada, there's UK, there's UAE, Australia, and various other countries. The world is your oyster. But let me put it a little bit different to the viewers today is that when you're thinking of going abroad, you must consider of certain factors. All right. And some of the key factors that one may want to consider would be number one, what are your goals? Is it that you're looking to migrate? Are you looking to do upskill your clinical skill set and return back to your home country? Or are you open to exploring the thought of staying back in that country? So that's your first criteria to deciding which country you should be narrowing down. Accordingly, to be very honest, the pathway changes drastically. The second would be if you're someone who loves learning languages, only then and then only please consider some of the European countries which do have language barriers. Some people do hear on the internet that there are some amazing advancements in Germany, and that's where I want to go. But thinking of it and practically executing it are two very different things. So if you're averse to learning languages, in fact, communicating on a day-to-day basis, let's say with your grocery shop, with your pharmacies, with your patient, all of these things do matter. And if that's something that you find as a hurdle in your journey, then please don't opt for that country. Opt for more English speaking countries, right? The third criteria or factor, I would call it, would be family. Family and relatives and friends, of course, are really dear to everyone. Sometimes they are huge attraction points for certain countries, but make sure that to find out whether is dentistry a flourishing field for you in that particular country before you marry yourself to that country in your thought process. Please be sure to find that out with, of course, professionals like us who are aware of the norms, the current norms. And mind you, the norms do change from year to year. So one must keep in mind to not reflect back on just your senior's journey or just somebody, maybe, one or two people that you've spoken to and rely just based on that. You must factor in all these latest information and snippets before finalizing. And last but not the least, of course, your finances. So, in today's world, I truly believe that nothing is impossible. There are solutions literally for everything out there. However, if you feel that your family and you want to limit it to a certain, expense or a certain budget, then please do bear that in mind when selecting the countries. So these are some of the factors that should govern your finalization or your decision to study or progressing your career in a foreign country. I hope that answers your question.
It's very crisp. It's to the point, and each and every point you have mentioned, I've seen people do blunders in them. Germany, for example, it's just a sudden craze. People think we should go to Germany, and then they go to the learning the language. It becomes an absolute horror story for them. So you have got absolutely right. Okay. But now you told the general rules. These rules are applicable if someone was trying to migrate in 2000s, 2010, 2020. It is timeless rules. Okay. But
Absolutely.
the current geopolitical situation is continuously molding. In today's day and age, that's 2025, 2026, what would be your top choice of countries?
I really appreciate the question. And I think, Yusuf, you would be a better person to tackle this question. So, right on to you.
Before you listen to the answer to that question, if you're liking this video, do not forget to hit the like button below because it shows YouTube what kind of videos you're interested in and shows you more of them. And if you're interested in taking your career to the next level, do not forget to hit the subscribe button because we keep on coming up with such amazing content out here.
Once again, thank you, Dr. Satish, for having us on this amazing platform, Kaizen Dental. So it's actually a fascinating question that you've asked, right? Because what we have realized over our decade of experience in this space is exactly what you pointed out, that there are some evergreen countries and destinations for advancing your career. And there are some that are more, let's say, seasonal players that come in for 5 years, 8 years, and then suddenly the interest drops or the acceptance levels in those countries drops. The best example of this seasonality that I can give you is Canada, which over the last 5, 8 years has seen a lot of boom in terms of dentists wanting to go there because they had an extremely welcoming PR policy. They were giving the best of lifestyle, amazing remunerations, and it was just an amazing space to go to. But in the last 6 to 8 months, we've seen a drastic decline, not only in the India-Canada politics that have gone down, but also in Canada, trying to not close its borders, but basically just limit the number of immigrants that they are allowing inside. We've had Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, and several other cabinet ministers actually speak out on it publicly that they will be revisiting how much the students can stay back on work visas and how many immigrants they're going to allow for PR. Uh, Having said that, on the other end of the spectrum, there is the UAE, for instance, which has an amazing Vision 2030 for their healthcare industry, which they are basically trying to make it the destination in at least this part of the world to go for medical treatments, to go for dental treatments. And because of that, we're seeing a lot of interest and a lot of acceptance from the country to provide licenses to Indian dentists. Of course, as Dr. Kosha mentioned right at the start, the evergreen country is the US. They have a plethora of opportunities. They have the best dental systems in the world in terms of research, in terms of advancements, you name it. And yeah, for that reason, I think the top two countries that we would recommend today, if someone asked us, would be the US or the UAE, depending on your specific factors and goals.
Great.
Absolutely.
Absolutely perfect. Okay. But there was one thing Dr. Kosha told at the start when she was telling the board criteria you have to consider. That is one is finances. Okay. For a lot of young dentists, there's this fear they're not earning anything and just out of with their degree out of the college. So finances plays a critical role because they have to take the whole family into confidence. It's not a personal decision. Okay. So when it comes to finances, what are the things you need to consider? And the various countries we are talking about, maybe it's the US, Canada, UK, UAE, how much one has to think in terms of arranging the finances for each and every country?
Okay. One of my favorite questions. I mean, I'm a finance geek, but I love this question because there is an inherent fear, as you said, right? Like people need to prepare themselves first and then their parents or their partners, whoever's basically helping them with the entire process. And finances play a very important role. We can't overlook that. It's not that the world is equal for everyone, regardless of your bank balance, right? But one of the things that we always tell our candidates is please don't limit your dreams or your goals based on your finances, because there are several tools available to help you with your finances. Now, in terms of which country and how do you go about uh, selecting the right destination. So let's just take these two countries that we spoke about, the US and the UAE. If you are financially restrained, uh, the UAE becomes an amazing destination because for as little as anywhere from 4 to 5 lakhs, you can actually start working in the UAE. The application process and the licensure process is between a lakh and two. And by the time you have to actually go for interviews, you want to plan a couple of trips to Dubai, to Abu Dhabi, you want to go there for in-person interviews, you want to go there to scout out the market. All of that inclusive is ballpark 4 to 5 lakhs. So on the lower end, you have the UAE. On the higher end, yes, if you want to go to the US, it does take you anywhere from about 70 lakhs to 2.2, 2.3 crores. But again, as I mentioned earlier, there are several financial tools available. You don't have to just rely on emptying your parents' or your partner's bank to finance this.
Okay. So now that you're talking about tools, is it about loans available and how does one find it? How does it work?
Yes. The best tool is loans available. And how do you find it? Honestly, you go to any of the big banks like SBI being the most popular education loan provider for, I think, at least a couple of decades that we are aware of. And apart from that, you have HDFC Credila, you have Axis Bank, and sorry, you have several other banks that do help with education loans, and especially for a secure industry like healthcare and dentistry. They are very secure in funding aspirants who have gotten admissions to, say, a college in the US, right? Apart from these banks, apart from these big name banks, you always have someone who is actually doing something amazing in this banking space, in this lending space. And for the last couple of years or so, there is Saraswat Bank, for example, that breaks the normal ceiling that banks set on themselves and gives you loans up to 1.5 CR for your education. Exactly.
I would like to
And
add to this. Sorry, Yusuf,
please.
please do verify because things rapidly change in the market. And thankfully, banks are very approachable. So are the marketing reps. So please do get your information from individual banks and always do not be afraid to compare the rates between one bank, Bank A and Bank B. And sometimes you may be surprised how Bank B might be able to do better than Bank A if you sort of bring it forward that you have approached Bank A. So definitely do a thorough research, and of course, we can be your sounding board to assist you in your journey forward.
Yeah. Absolutely. That Dental Window has helped a lot of your clients with the same. So, and with the knowledge we do have is easily not available. So, having mentors like you always is an added advantage.
Thank you. I would like to add that apart from the private banks and the nationalized banks, there are a lot of private loan lenders as well. So one of the most popular is Avance, which again gives up to 1.25 CR, which is information that is up to date as of today. You have the UK-based Prodigy Finance, which functions all across the world. Just because they're based in the UK doesn't mean they only finance your education in the UK. They finance education in the US and other parts of the world as well. You have a US-based Empower. And for those with families or someone who can sign off as a co-signer for their loans, you have uh, Sally Mae and Ascent funding that exist in the US, which will actually be extremely beneficial. Like, this is one of the hacks that we tell our candidates very often, is that if you have someone who has a green card or is a citizen in the US who's willing to sign off on your loans, you should look at these American lenders, because the the rate of interest on that education loan is significantly lower. It's somewhere around 5 to 8% if you have an American signing off.
Great. So, this is the advantage of the inner secrets you are spilling out today. Yeah, viewer.
In fact, Dr. Satish, I would like to mention that each and every education loan provider is doing better and better. For instance, Avance used to provide somewhere around 75, 80 lakhs. They have pushed their limit also, as Yusuf rightly pointed out. So everybody is trying to do more for the field of education and more so in the field of healthcare. So do not be afraid to chase your dreams, and we are here always to help you achieve them.
Great. But I'll be honest, there's this Indian mentality, okay, against loan. So it's like if I would take such a big loan and directly make this one shot attempt to go into the US, okay? So a lot of people have this mentality that rather than trying and targeting a clinical field where I might have to spend more, why not I put my foot into the door, get into a non-clinical field, maybe an MPH, MPH, MHA or something, get into the system. When I'm in the system, as I'm earning, then let me make that shift into dentistry. What is your opinion about that? The convoluted route rather than going straight into it.
Absolutely. This is, in fact, one of my favorite questions or other myths to bust also. So, thank you so much for asking me this question. Well, MPH, MHA, or these are public health and healthcare administration, and let's say healthcare informatics, you name it, and these are all fantastic fields. Absolutely no doubt about it. There is no right or wrong way. Let's first put it out there that there is no right or wrong way. There are two schools of thought. One is that there are certain parents out there who aren't very comfortable sending their kid for a 1 year short-term program to build their profile and then approach degree programs in the US. They want the kid to make sure that they have a fallback plan. Or you may be of that mindset that, as an applicant, that I want a fallback plan. In which case, MPH, MHA, MHI are all great fields to opt for. But even uh, if there is a slightest chance that you feel that, oh my God, I'm going to get stuck in this non-clinical thing when I'm actually truly interested in clinical, right? In that case, then these are not your only options. You do have other programs such as the preceptorship programs, which are nothing but observership programs on campus. All right. And they have a lot of perks. All right. Please do reach out to us to understand how you can use these to your advantage. Stick around in the US for a little longer also than the period of the program, and make sure that you strengthen your profile towards degree programs like DDS, residencies, AGD, so on and so forth. So once again, it entirely depends on your financial feasibility also. These programs such as the MPH, MHI, MHA, all of them, even MBA healthcare management for that matter, do cost a lot. They do cost anywhere between 50 lakhs to all the way up to 80 lakhs, depending on which public health school or healthcare administration school you're going to. Right. So if you are not, all in for that kind of an expense before your degree programs, then it's totally okay to opt for advanced clinical training programs, fellowships, preceptorships. They are equally good to build your profile in a clinical space. In fact, more so for the pandemic afflicted batches, I would say, please stick to clinical as much as possible, because there is a gap which was worldwide. It isn't true just for one individual or the other individual or a cohort of 50 people. Everyone went through it. But the real question is, how are you bridging that gap? What are you doing to bridge that clinical gap that you had in your life? So make sure that you are boosting your clinical skill set in a clinical environment if it is required for your profile. Now, one last point that I would like to make over here for this particular question is that I surely recommend MPH or MHA or any of the other non-clinical branches, even masters in oral biology for that matter, if your grade point average, which is basically a conversion of your Indian scores into a US grade point average system. It's a scale score basically out of 0 to 4. So let's say that your GPA is below 3. Typically, 3 is the minimum requirement. If it's below 3.0, then yes, do consider taking up a degree program like Masters in Public Health or something, which will allow you to fetch one more GPA. That will inevitably make sure that you are a competitive applicant and you are ready to participate in this race of degree programs like DDS, residencies, AGD, and such in the US. I hope that summarizes your question well.
That's absolutely detailed because what people think is it's either this or that. What you have told, absolutely perfect, that you need to consider your situation, whether you want it for your GPA, whether you're keen on having a backup option as a non-clinical. Otherwise, there is absolutely no need to do it. You can make a straight attempt to the dentistry route as well. So you have told it very crisp. I'm sure the viewers would have got that answer. Okay. Now you're telling me so many answers from Yusuf and you. Okay. Can this entire process be done on their own, or you always feel there's a mentor? What have you seen people usually striving and trying to get into? What do they do?
To be very honest, I'd like to put it this way that if you have ample time at hand and you don't want to do anything else in life, please by all means go ahead and try things out your way. The trial and error will cost you money. Do it at your own risk. Right? So what happens is, yes, seniors are there, your well-wishers are there, and they'll guide you. But they'll guide you only from their perspective. Let's say if your senior is helping you, they have only ever done one application in their whole life, right? Whereas to understand the nuances of your profile, your strengths, your weaknesses, you do need a person who is well versed with the entire process. For us Indians, our entire process is driven by one exam, NEET PG exam, right? So literally people drop everything for 1 year and they're only studying for that NEET PG exam, right? But can you afford to do that for when you're applying to not just the US or even UK or any other, even Canada for that matter? Can you only study for an exam? The answer is no. You need to be able to look into your profile building, your statement of purpose, your letters of recommendations, your application form filling, your supplemental and secondary applications that you have. So there are a host of things that need to be considered at the very outset. So charting out a timeline and understanding what are the expenses you're going to have along the way, what comes before what? Is it that I should give IMBD first? Should I start with profile building first? Should I start with some kind of essay writing first? This confusion should stop at the level where if you're thinking abroad, seek help. Seek help because it's available. I'm sure you would admit, Dr. Satish, way back in our time, I don't think we had anybody to guide us to this very extent, right? So if there is this kind of help available, why not opt for it? And unfortunately, today in this market, what's happening is that there are definitely a lot of career consultants out there, which is great, incredible that they are out to guide. Unfortunately, these consultants don't understand the dental space very well, which is why your previous question that you asked me about MPH, should you opt for MPH or MHA? This is widely actually recommended by other consultants who don't understand the dental space well, which is where you need to understand and reach out to professionals who specialize in this very field itself. So my advice would be definitely try to do your own research. You don't need to, directly just approach to a counselor. Do your own research, have your own points ready, jot down all your questions properly, talk to some seniors, get some feedback. Professional networking is always key, but don't go by somebody else's journey. Create your own path to success is what I would say at the end of the day.
It's really well.
I would like to add to that.
Sure.
Yeah. So essentially, we've seen this year on year over at least the last 5-6 years, if not right from the time we started in this industry, is that we'll always have a handful of candidates or maybe more who have applied for one cycle on their own and then they have sought help, right?
True.
And the feedback we get from them year on year, candidate after candidate is, oh, I did not think that this was relevant to my CAPIT application, which is the DDS application, or I did not think that I could apply to master's residencies, or that, oh, I didn't know that the SOP should be written this way because I had copied something from some template and I didn't realize that I was missing out on key details that should go in there. So there is a lot to actually process in terms of information. The reason why I believe Kosha actually mentioned that, if you have lots of time on your hand, is because it's taken us years to get to the stage where we have learned from our own mistakes. We've learned from our own experiences. We've learned from others' mistakes as well. So there is a lot of nuanced process that goes into applying to a school overseas.
Yeah. So it makes sense because what happens is you need to multitask and there are multiple things you need to keep in mind, which as a first timer, you might miss out.
Yeah.
And when it is extremely competitive, even that one point, just because you couldn't think about it, might be the difference between you getting into a university out there or you have to repeating your cycle next year again. So just to try and save some money it's like when you buy the entire elephant, if you do not buy the band to keep it tight, you might end up losing the elephant. Similar, when you know you're going to spend so much money and time going abroad, why not make in that effort and find a mentor to help you? My next question to you is, what about the visa process? Is it easy or is it very difficult?
Do you want to take this, Kosha?
Yes. So there is unnecessary fear mongering, I would say, around the visa process in general. But firstly, there are various different types of visas. There are student visas, there are work visas, and then migration related visas, and all of that. Your first step is to identify what is it that you want to do. Are you pursuing an educational pathway? Are you pursuing a licensure pathway? What is it that you are going to require? And once you've identified that with the help of professionals or understanding through your network that you have created for yourself, then identify who is the right person for the visa process. For instance, even our expertise is applications. We are counselors and we assist with the entire end-to-end application process as well as interview processes. And our niche is in that. That doesn't mean that we'll go ahead and do your paperwork as well for your visas. There are experts from literally years together that Indians have been using for their requirements. These are visa agents that are very good at their work, and at the end of the day, it is nothing but paperwork, right? So don't be afraid of doing some little bit paperwork with the help of someone else, right? Having said that, I think there is one hot subject that I do want to address today, given that we have the opportunity to address your viewers, Dr. Satish, is that in the US currently, there is a lot of fear about the H-1B visa. Right, I'm sure you must have heard. There's literally every newspaper has at least one article every day, right? So let me address this now. The H-1B process, first and foremost, for years together, has been a lottery-based system, a randomized system, which has a certain limit or a cap to it, which is about 65,000 odd visas that are given out every single year. All right. Now, this year onwards, due to the change in the presidency, there is a lot of fear mongering. What will happen? Will I get my work visa after investing so much into my education? Is it something that I will be able to recover? Because, of course, if you've invested in yourself, you're also looking at a return on it, right? For us as healthcare providers, we must remember three core things. Number one, we are not minimum wage workers. We are highly skilled workers. So we needn't worry about this aspect of it. Two, we are not in the tech space. Unfortunately, the IT industry has been hit hard. Much like the last time, it is the IT industry that suffers because they are looking for a job directly in the United States. Whereas us as dentists in the United States, we are actually first and foremost investing our time in minimum 2 years of clinical training and only then adding to their workforce. So we don't fall in that category at all, right? And last but not the least, we have something known as cap exempt H-1B visa also that actually crosses the cap of 65,000 visas and allows you to directly get jobs at federally qualified healthcare centers as well as academic jobs with faculty practices. So this fear mongering that's there, if you are in the IT sector, you're watching the wrong video firstly. And if you are a dentist, then you don't need to worry anything to do with your work visas because the healthcare, if anything, has only been booming. Pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, post-pandemic, Trump era, re-Trump era, it has always been stabilized. In fact, there are a lot of corrections that have recently been made effective January 17, which has made the H-1B visa process a lot simpler. Having said that, as dentists, as healthcare providers, you needn't worry whether you're going to get a job or not. And last but not the least, there are bilateral agreements with respect to healthcare providers between countries. For example, if you have pursued your DDS in the US, you can practice in Canada also. If you are if you have pursued your DDS in Canada, you can actually practice in Ireland. All right. Similarly, if you have, got your DDS, you can also make sure that you've taken the final license exam and you might be eligible for New Zealand as well. Okay, so there's so much of interconnection, global recognition that exists, that is the main reason why US stands to be the undisputed leader on the board even as on today, and we foresee that we continue to be for at least us dentists, leaving aside all other healthcare providers. So I hope that helps a lot of our viewers to get rid of this fear that what if I'm not able to recover my money. You will 100% be able to recover your money.
Great. So now that you have shed light over the visa process and the confusion people have about H-1B and the fear which has been spread across just not IT professionals, even dentists currently, you have explained that in depth, okay? But this is one of the fears people have. Other than that, during the entire process, they make a lot of mistakes which we are not aware of. And you have seen a common pattern over the last 10 years. So, what are the common mistakes those who are planning to go abroad make, and how can they avoid it?
Right. That is one loaded question. And unfortunately, there are quite a few mistakes that people land up making when they're, trying to do the process on their own. A few that I'm going to attempt to address today would be, let's start with something very, very simple. If you are applying for a particular program and they have requested for a minimum score of 100 out of 120 in an English proficiency test like TOEFL, and if you get 99, please don't apply with 99. If there is a minimum requirement, it's there for a reason. Please try to cross it, retake the TOEFL test. Thankfully, it's conducted multiple times in a single month, even. And you can take it literally from any part of the world. So please do take the effort to retake it and try to exceed the score. Remember that, let's take US in consideration for this purpose. If you are applying to a DDS program or residencies, the INBD exam is a pass and fail exam. What does that mean? Essentially, every person who is applying will have a pass status. So if you're going to only focus on taking the exam and you're going to avoid building your profile, which is literally the rest of your application, you are not going to get accepted, right? There are many people who say, oh, I heard my senior try applying once, twice, thrice, still didn't get accepted. So the question to ask is, what did they change in their application from the last time to the next time, right? So that's something that you need to focus on. Build your profile, represent every tiny bit that you have in your profile to the best of your ability, right? So that's one aspect of things. The second aspect of things is that, like you rightly put, sometimes people do try to do things on their own. They'll write their own essays, they'll write their own letters or whatever. But writing it on your own is not a problem. Using the wrong tools for it is the problem. For example, if you're just Google searching and you're looking at templates and picking bits and pieces of that and adding it to your story, first and foremost, the uniqueness of your story is not going to come through in your essay. Secondly, you're going to land up looking like literally any other application that's going out. So 50% of the applications are discarded because of the lackluster luster of the content that they have sort of written in their entire application. Then comes the part where if you are not, let's assume that you're somebody who has had some amount of work experience in your life, but you're writing your statement of purpose like someone who has just graduated. That's not going to do justice to what the kind of work you've done, to your passion, to your commitment to dentistry, none of that. So there is no cookie cutter formula in this scenario. You will have to do the hard work. You will have to dig deeper to understand what your strengths are. If there are weaknesses, how can you present them in such a manner that you say that it is a work in progress? And make sure that you address each component of your application in such a manner where all your attributes are, sort of spread across your application. That's what they really want to know about, right? At the end of the day. Another mistake that I feel that sometimes people do land up making is that supposedly in college or in your, junior college or your school, you may have learned French, you may have learned Sanskrit or any other language. I don't know. There are quite a few languages that are being taught as on today. So, in this case, if you're not going to mention what is the level to which you can use that language, that's going to actually, sort of be a situation where you're shooting yourself in the leg. Because come the interview, let's assume you're selected and they ask you, okay, hey, can you fluently speak to a patient in that language? If you know Spanish, they will expect you to be able to converse with the patients over there or even the staff. There's a huge population that is, your dental assistants, hygienists, so on and so forth, front desk that do speak Spanish very fluently. So mentioning the level is very important. For example, are you at the primary level, intermediate level, advanced level? Which will sort of signify or rather reflect the level to which you can speak that particular language, right? And there's a plethora of mistakes, but I think the topmost mistake that I feel that people end up making is not seeking help in this day and age when connecting with people should come naturally to you. And if you're unable to do so, professional networking or seeking a professional for their advice, then I think that's the number one blunder that you're making in your investment to yourself, investment in your career. So rest assured, if there is something that you're confused about, you don't know how to go about the timeline, you want to know what expenses you're going to have to incur along the way, then please do reach out to us to understand the entire process before you embark on it. Because it would be so demotivating if you have to sort of discontinue your pathway just because your finances can't, support you through the journey. So that's also something that people, must bear in mind. Even parents must include themselves in the decision making process. So many a times when we do conduct these counseling sessions, 99% the follow up sessions are with parents or guardians or spouses, anyone who is a decision maker in the process of, your career abroad. So it's not a small thing, I understand. It's a valuable thing for not just you in your life, but it's going to have repercussions, or it's going to have an effect, extensive effect on the rest of your family also. So please take the time to come together, support each other, and decide how you want to proceed forward. So I think these are some of the top mistakes. Yusuf, do you think there's anything else that I have left out?
I mean, to be honest, there are several mistakes that we can cover, but I think you've done a great job of covering the top mistakes that a lot of candidates make, right?
Right.
One extra point that I would like to add is uh, while planning your career abroad, I think there is a simultaneous overestimating and underestimating the process itself. So while people get scared that, oh, I'll have to take the ILDD, I'll have to take the TOEFL, I'll have to write an SOP, I'll have to write the LOR, they get scared of that part. But at the same time, they also overestimate themselves in the terms of, I can do everything. I can run a clinic. I can do this on my own. I can study on my own. I can do all of this. The first step of any successful endeavor is planning and foresight. If you don't have that, then it becomes very difficult. And at every stage, you're going to get surprised by how cumbersome the next stage is, or how difficult it is, or how tricky it is. Oh, I didn't know there was this part to the process as well. I didn't know I had to create a CV. What is a CV? Is it a resume? Is it something else? So don't get surprised by anything. Lay things out in advance, which we help, of course. We help every candidate right from our first consult throughout the process as well. So you plan it out well and then execute. So you were talking.
I remember one more mistake is basically one of the blunders that people do land up making is believing hearsay a whole lot and making it the truth of their lives, which is that one cannot pursue masters in the US or a postgrad specialization in the US, which is absolutely untrue. If there's any of this news, sort of floating around, please put an end to it, because it is not true. You can very well apply for postgrad program directly to the US without pursuing your DDS. However, there are some caveats to it or conditions to it that one must keep in mind. For instance, let's assume that you are looking to apply for a prosthodontic program in the US, or endodontics, any other specialization for that matter. Upon graduation, you are eligible to practicing in 8 states in the United States as well as Canada for the first 3 years or 5,000 hours of your practice. So, yes, it's very possible for you to pursue it. But is your profile right for it or not? Is the real question. For instance, if you're, like I said, if you're applying to Prosto, but your entire profile is screaming endodontics for some reason, then the admissions committee is not going to look at you, and you're not going to receive an interview. So profile building does play a huge part in your role, does play a huge role in your entire application process, and you must pay attention to what you're presenting to the admissions committee. So that's one thing that I really wanted to put out there, that you can pursue postgrad programs in the US. The seat availability is definitely lower than DDS, and the number of states that you can practice is also lower. But really passionate about a field and you really are good at your hand skills in that, definitely please explore it and try to understand from us which schools are the right choice for you. So applying to the wrong schools is also a problem. If you are not allowed to apply as a foreign trained dentist in a particular school, please don't apply. You must read the finer print. If you don't have the time to do so, Please rely on professionals like us who literally breathe this day in, day out. That's my top advice to candidates out there.
So my next question to you is about the timeline. Okay. How much time does this entire process start? So today, if I finished internship, how long does it take me to get into the US system, settle out there? What is your opinion about it?
Okay. That's that's actually one of those questions that generally we get more from interns, less from the more experienced candidates. Maybe it's just like patience that you develop as you move on in life. But the question actually is an interesting one because in general, it would take you anywhere from 8 to 10 months on the lower end. If you're really lucky, you get through in the first cycle, you're actually doing every step right, you're seeking guidance and all of that. On the higher end, it could take you 1.5 years or a little longer than that. But there are a couple of factors that you should factor in into this. One is when do you start? So, for instance, right now we're sitting towards the fag end of Jan. So, if someone approaches us now, they have a great chance of making that 8 to 10 months timeline work because the capit cycle opens in the next 2 months, less than 2 months, in fact. So, versus someone if they had contacted us in September, October, then there is that wait period for the next cycle, and so it takes lesser time. But it does not mean that the right time to approach or to start thinking about it is Jan or is Feb or something like that. It's just that
Definitely.
there are several factors that you should consider in terms of the timeline. One is what kind of programs are you applying to? The second is what kind of experience and profile do you have? I know we've both been talking about profile building and having the right kind of experiences in your KT to showcase. So if you are an intern and if you're coming to us, then yes, we will try and expedite it as much as possible. But what we highly recommend is that if you're a dental student, rather than internship, start thinking about this in the third year, start actioning it in maybe the end of the third year or the fourth year so that you have time to build the right profile and make the most of the first application cycle.
Understood. So now we have realized that it is important you have mentors out there to help you. And since you all have been doing it for the last 10 years, you're one of the ideal mentors to help people out. Okay. So if I am a candidate and I'm interested to contact you, how do I do that?
Fantastic. Please reach out to us via our website, which is dentalwindow.com, or find us on Instagram. We're available under instagram.com/dentalwindow, or just search for us as Dental Window. Singular Dental Window, not windows. And you can find our contact details on both the website and our Instagram pages.
Great.
Absolutely. You can even write an email to us at info@dentalwindow.com. Please start writing emails because no university ever on this planet is going to send you a WhatsApp. So start writing the emails to us and making sure that you are all ready for the communication over emails.
Great.
Thank you so much, Dr. Satish.
Thank you, Dr. Kosha, and thank you, Yusuf, for taking your time and joining us today. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Dr.
Absolutely.
Saprish.
It's been a
was
pleasure.
fantastic. Yes.
If you like this video, do not forget to check out our other two videos which might help you make your final decision.